Great. Welcome, everyone. This is Evaluating Job Offers and Salary Negotiation. My name is Rachel Wilbrack. I'm the Program Director for the College of Computer, Mathematical, and Natural Sciences. Jeffrey is also on here helping to do some of the chat management and letting some of you in out of the waiting room and things like that. While both of us work for or with CMNS, this is open to all majors. So just know that while most of my examples might be pointing out CMNS majors, that doesn't mean that this isn't for you and that this isn't just as relevant to you as well. That's just my lens of how I work with students. So first, we're going to start out with evaluating job offers, kind of talk through that a little bit, and then we'll get on to the salary negotiation piece. If you have questions as we go, please feel free, put that in the chat. I know Jeffrey will be keeping an eye on that. If there's something relevant that needs to come up right then, he's welcome to interrupt me and share it. Otherwise, I'll get to any of them at the end. All righty. All right, so jumping right in. You've been offered a job, and I know this is a big, long list here. There's a lot of things to consider. I think a lot of people think of salary first, and I completely understand how much you're going to be paid is a significant reason to consider or not consider an offer. But we want to talk about all the different things that you need to consider when you're given an offer, or maybe even multiple offers for different jobs. Salary benefits, you might be comparing two different opportunities, and maybe one offers a better benefits package. So reminder, that could be your health, that could be vision, dental, a prescription coverage, 401k, sometimes there's stock options, and of course other benefits too. You know, like how many days off you get, things like that. But those are kind of the main ones that you're going to want to think about and maybe compare. Some organizations just have better benefits packages, and that might make the difference, right? Some of those things might be important to you, or some things less important. The culture of the organization is also something to think about. If you're looking at two organizations and one is very centered on work and working until the job's done and working all hours, and you don't get that, you know, work-life balance feeling from it, that may or may not be a plus or a minus, right? It might be a culture of, you know, a creative work environment, or it might be a very collaborative culture where you're working together, or it might be very siloed culture of environment where it's like everyone has their task and they work alone and they don't collaborate much. And sometimes some of these environments are more appealing or less appealing. And so knowing what you're looking for and being able to compare that when you're thinking about different job offers can be really important to making your decision. Location, of course, is a big thing too, not just where do you want to live, but also like cost of living and how that figures into it, right? And that can also figure into salary. You can be offered two different jobs in two different cities. They can offer the same amount, but one has a higher cost of living, so it's less buying power, or maybe even one of them offers less in a salary, but it's in an area where that money might go further than the slightly higher salary in a more expensive area. So things to think about. Also, even if we're talking about the same metropolitan area, let's say, you know, you're applying to positions here in, you know, the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area. Your commute will be very different if you plan to live in College Park and commute to Bethesda than it would be if you live in College Park and commute to Arlington. Ways you get there might be similar or different. You might choose to drive or take the metro. I mean, assuming we're going places in person, right? But deciding what you're willing to do commute-wise is another thing to think about, and whether you might be willing to move. Living expenses lots of times comes into the cost of living aspect too. But again, this can also come back to transportation needs as well. Position and responsibilities when looking and comparing positions, or even if it's just one offer, knowing whether the position and the responsibilities that you will be asked to do or complete, making sure that those are things that you want to do, that you will feel good about doing, fulfilled doing, that you feel like you can do and have the experience to do. Sometimes we apply for opportunities and we realize that the work that we're going to be doing is a little different than we initially thought. And so comparing that and considering that's really important. Sometimes a company's brand or notoriety or prestige is important. I know that sometimes people like to work for big companies that have a splashy name that everybody knows, and that's great. Sometimes that's not as important to other people that may, look at something else as being more important. So knowing what's important to you and what's going to make you the happiest or make you the most fulfilled in your position is good to know and to compare. Professional development opportunities. Some organizations will be really upfront, and that can be seen as a benefit for sure, that they're willing to pay for you to go back to grad school or to take some kind of certification or to attend conferences. Knowing what they offer can be another piece of the puzzle as you're trying to weigh different options, or even just weigh one option as if it's the right one for you, or whether you want to wait and see if another better opportunity comes along. Again, educational reimbursement can be part of that professional development. Sometimes it's paying for that degree. Sometimes it's even like letting you take the time off during the workday to take a class. Sometimes there are stipulations with that, and that can be good to know too. If they are willing to pay for a degree, do they have stipulations or requirements that you stay with the organization after you receive that degree? Sometimes it's just, as long as you're working here, we'll pay for it. Sometimes it's, well, you have to stay 6 months after your, degree is completed. Otherwise, they might make you pay back what they paid for your tuition. I've also heard of some organizations where it's half the time that it took you to receive the degree. So if it took you 4 years to get a PhD while working with them, then they expect you to stay for 2 more years. So knowing what that is and how that might affect your ability to get additional education, if you want it, is something to think about and consider. Relocation reimbursement. Some organizations will offer money to help you move across the country, or maybe even just relocate to a slightly different city than you currently are in. That can be consideration. Also, sometimes a signing bonus. This is a way for them to give you a little bit more money up front, but not roll it into your salary, because if they roll it into your salary, then they have to keep paying you that same amount every year, where if it's a signing bonus, it's a one-time thing, but it can be a way to entice you to sign with them. Amenities, of course. Does that organization or workplace offer certain opportunities to you? So when we are going on, into offices, or if your position even is one where you will be on site, sometimes we hear about the examples of them having ping pong tables or a snack bar or cafeteria, or, those kind of things. Or maybe it's just that they offer, they're a big space, but they offer quiet rooms to have private phone calls or Zoom meetings if you need them. But like normally you work in like a big cubicle space. Just knowing what different amenities or things they might offer at their location is also a consideration. And then of course, this big piece, will they encourage you or allow you to work from home, remote work options? Right now, a lot of organizations are doing that and rethinking how they're doing that. Obviously, before the last year, that was not always something that they were thinking about. Some organizations were much more open to the idea of remote work. I think now more organizations have to be open, or at least thoughtful about it a little bit. Even if they want people to come back into the office, I think saying you can't do it at all would be really a hard sell for a lot of organizations, but knowing what their threshold is and how often they might let you do that, if that's something that you want to do. You may not. They may want you to work remotely and you want to come into the office. So all things to consider. I like to kind of go through the list because I know salary is kind of the big one that most people think about, but just knowing that there's a lot of different pieces that can come into play when you're considering a specific job opportunity and whether it's something you're interested in. Okay, so some questions you might have asked or heard other people ask. What do I do when I can't get all the factors I want? I went through a huge list there, and you might have an idea and a preference about each one. If you have an opportunity presented to you that checks all your boxes exactly how you want, congratulations, that's awesome. It typically doesn't happen that way. Hopefully a really good offer is going to give you most of the things you want though. But when you can't get all the things that you want, how do you weigh those options? how do you figure out what the best fit is? It's kind of, it's a personal thought and conversation that you're going to have with yourself. What are the most important things? What are the things that you can live without? What are what are the nice to haves versus the must haves, and knowing what things might make up for other things. So if you are comparing two positions and you have one position that is offering a little bit more money, but maybe the culture of the environment doesn't feel right to you. It doesn't feel like it was as good of a match as maybe another position that pays slightly less. We'll get to the maybe getting that salary up a little bit. But like if you've gotten to the point where you can't bring that salary up anymore and it's a little lower, like which is more important to you? Is it getting a little bit more money? Is it being in a culture and environment that feels like a better match for you? There's no right or wrong answer, only you can kind of decide that. Like I said, sometimes there's the opportunity to counter offer negotiate. I've heard of some people even negotiating, maybe they can't bring a salary up, but they can get a little bit more in their signing bonus. Again, because that allows an employer to not have to add it into your salary every year, but it gives you a little money up front. Or someone saying, well, if you can't match this salary, could I have more options to work from home? Or is there an option to have more days off built into my benefits package or something like that? So there's a lot of different things that you can try and ask for that might help you make the decision if you can't get every single factor that you want. All right. So you might be in a situation where you need to give one recruiter an answer, but you're still waiting on other offers to come in, right? You don't want to take an offer and potentially miss out on a better one, but you also don't want to let an offer go potentially that sounds like a good offer and not have other opportunities later. So I understand it's a really hard decision. So there's a couple things you can do, right? You can accept the offer right from the beginning because it's a great opportunity and you're really interested in it. You could certainly decline an offer and wait for other opportunities to come. You could also ask for more time. This would be the first step that I would take. If you're really uncertain, asking for more time can be a helpful way. Sometimes you'll get it, sometimes you won't. I think it can be the easiest to ask for more time when you know that another offer is coming soon. So maybe you need to let an organization know by, let's say, April 10th. And you know that you have another interview and that you should be finding out about another opportunity on April 15th. Being able to go to that first organization before the 10th, right? Don't wait till the last minute, and ask if you can have a little bit more time or a little bit more wiggle room, and ask if you can get back to them maybe on the 17th, like ask for an extra week or maybe 2 weeks, whatever works, right? Then by giving yourself a little bit more time than when you expect that other offer to come in, you then have the opportunity to give yourself a little bit more time. Because if you hear about that other offer on the 15th, you now have 2 days to kind of decide, okay, do I want to go with this new offer or this other one that I've gotten extended time for? Doesn't always work, like I said. Sometimes they're farther apart and getting more time isn't as helpful. But if you can ask for more time, try to give yourself enough time, like make sure that it pushes it past when you expect to hear from that other offer that you're considering. Because if we are dealing with deadlines like the 10th and the 15th, and you ask for 2 more days to the 12th, that's not necessarily going to help you if you're still waiting till the 15th to hear about the other opportunity. All right, so based on those things that I just said, you might also say, why can't I accept one offer thinking that I can always renege and take another job later? It's certainly an option. I don't encourage it. I'm never going to be like excited for someone to do it. But I also recognize, and I want to be open about that, sometimes we're just stuck, right? Sometimes there are so many things going on. It's not an easy decision to make. And I don't think anyone accepts a job excited to renege and potentially turn somebody down. Like, I don't think anybody does that for the most part. So I know sometimes that's just the decision that needs to be made. But some things to think about if you do kind of go into that situation thinking, okay, I'm still waiting for this other offer, but I can always turn this one down. I'm going to accept it. Do know that could potentially burn bridges with that organization or with that recruiter in the future. you know, if you decide you want to work for that organization in the future, they might remember you, or they might still have you on file as someone who accepted an internship and then, you know, accepted and decided not to take it. That recruiter may move around and work for different organizations and could remember you. Maybe they won't. But it is a chance that you take, and it's something that you want to think about. Also knowing that sometimes organizations talk, recruiters from one organization talk to another. It could potentially also hurt other Maryland students. Typically a one-off isn't, but if we have one employer that has a lot of UMD students that are reneging, that could leave a bad taste in their mouth, right? That could make them think, oh man, Maryland students, you know, they'll say they're coming and then they leave me hanging. And of course, it's not the most ethical of decisions, right? If you're accepting an offer, the idea is that you're accepting it, not just holding on to it. So you have it, but maybe someone else can't. I say all this knowing that, again, sometimes it can't be avoided and sometimes it is the best decision. You know, I saw last year with internships, you know, because the pandemic hit, that there were employers that all of a sudden decided not to have their internship, and they had offered and people had accepted. And now they turned around and said, hey, sorry, we're not going to have an internship this year. And so, you know, part of me says that when an organization needs to cut you loose, they'll do it. So while I think you should think long and hard and be careful about your decision, I don't think that reneging is always the worst thing that you can do. That organization will be inconvenienced, and, you know, hopefully you feel bad about that, right? But like, at the end of the day, like, if they need to, they'll tell you they can't take you. So I think you need to be careful about it, but it's not something that you can't do. I try to be understanding about it, but also, like I said, thinking through the potential consequences of doing that. The other thing I should mention before getting into salary negotiation is, if you do find yourself in a situation where you've accepted an offer and now you need to renege because you want to take a different offer, please come and talk to me. I am happy. I'm not going to talk you out of it. I'm going to talk through with you best ways to do it, how to best reach out to try to minimize any damage that you make, right? The ways that you can have that conversation with that recruiter. Also, if you're, you know, between two job offers and you're trying to weigh options, I'm certainly not going to tell you which one to pick, but I can help you kind of talk through it. Jeffrey could as well. So like, think about making an appointment if you find yourself in that situation, because we're happy to help kind of talk through that situation. Okay. All right. Before I move on, Jeffrey, were there any questions that I should specifically address now that were related to job offers?
Nope, nothing has come in yet. But just as a reminder to everyone, please do feel free to put your questions in the chat, and Rachel will be able to go over them after the formal presentation is over.
You know what? I'm seeing someone sent me one as a direct message, so I'll answer that one now. How do we really know about the environment before we start working there, or culture? Yes. It's a tough one, because you're right. You don't always know. Sometimes a place will seem really great. Everyone's happy the day that you go to interview, or that you're interviewing on Zoom. And when you're there, you realize maybe it's not the best environment. So like, there's always a chance. What I would say is, do your best judgment from what you can see. So sometimes in an interview, you can sometimes tell if you're meeting with a big group that some people aren't excited to be there, or the way that they talk about the culture of the organization. Like, I know one thing that people have kind of pointed out is like, some of these big companies in Silicon Valley that say, oh, we have a cafeteria on site, and we have dry cleaning, and we have this, and like, they make it seem like you'd never want to leave. There's a reason they're trying to do that. They don't want you to leave. If they can get you to stick around a little longer because you can drop off dry cleaning or whatever it is, then they know that you might stick around and work longer that day, and work more than 8 hours or whatever, you know, you're expected to that day. Also reaching out to friends or alumni through LinkedIn that might work for some of these organizations. You know, you can always request to do an informational interview, ask them what they like about working for that organization. It can be a way just to kind of see like what they like, what are some challenges. Also, reviews online, so sites like Glassdoor. Do remember though, on Glassdoor, you will typically see both ends of the spectrum, right? You're gonna see the people who absolutely love it, drinking the Kool-Aid, right? And you're gonna see the people who had the worst experience possible. And so kind of like weigh that and know that you're gonna see both extremes. If you see a lot of negatives and no positives, or vice versa, those might be things to consider too. But just know that like, it may seem a little weird because you may see some people that like seem to love the place and other people that hate it. And you're like, okay, so what's it like for the average? But that's where maybe reaching out to someone online that you already know, or using a site like LinkedIn to say, all right, let's see if I can find a Maryland alum that works at XYZ company, can then be your entryway to kind of find out what they think about the organization, or ask them what they think of the culture, and, you know, look for some maybe red flags. Something I've been seeing on Twitter recently, and I had to laugh because I think it might be true, is the idea that if an organization says that they have a fast-paced environment, that might also mean that it's a little toxic and they don't have the best work-life balance. That may not always be true, but I saw that if you see that in a job description, to be careful. So like I said, not always true, but kind of made me laugh. And like sometimes there will be those red flags, or how they talk about the experience, that you might be able to get an idea of culture or environment. Alrighty, so moving into salary negotiation. All right, so what to do? We already talked a little bit about buying yourself some time if you have two competing offers, but you can also buy yourself some time if you just need some time to think about the one offer that you've received, and maybe whether what they're offering you is a strong salary, benefits package, etc. You're going to think carefully. You're going to do your homework, or do some research, and have a strategy. And so we're going to kind of dive into these a little bit. So buying yourself some time. You'll either get a phone call or an email where an organization is reaching out and saying, you know, dear job seeker, we're so excited to offer you XYZ position. We'd like to start you at this amount. Here's the important information. We hope you can get back to us soon, right? So whether it's phone or email, first thing to do is thank them, whether you're excited about the opportunity or not. Hopefully you're excited, but you know, like I said, sometimes you go to an interview and you leave it going, all right, maybe not the best fit for me. But no matter what happens, you're always going to thank them first and foremost, because they're offering you a job. So whether you take it or not, you're thankful that they obviously think you're great because they're offering you a job. So tell them how excited you are to receive the offer. That doesn't mean you have to say, oh, I'm so excited, I can't wait to start. But, you know, thank them, tell them you're excited about receiving the offer. And if you feel like you need some more time to think about it, you know, ask, if they haven't already told you, ask them when they'd like to know by. If it's Monday and they say, hey, could you let us know by Friday? And you know that you could use a little bit more time, you can always say, well, you know, would it be possible for me to take the weekend as well, so I can discuss it with family members, or whoever you think, I mean, if that's true, if you feel like you want to discuss it with family members or friends, or get other opinions, that kind of thing, or just ask for the weekend. You don't have to tell them why, but tell them or ask them if you feel like you need more time to consider the offer. You could also come to them partway through the week and ask for that too. It's not like you have to say it in that moment. Sometimes the excitement of getting an offer makes my brain go blank, and so I forget all the things that I should be saying. So that's when maybe even following up a day later and saying, hey, thanks so much again. I know you said you want to know by Friday, but could I have like an additional week, or, you know, at least the weekend or something like that? You can always make that request. I do suggest not waiting till last minute, because if you reach out on Friday and say, hey, I know you want to know today, but can I have some more time? They were expecting to hear from you today, a yes or no, and they may need to ask other people if they can give you more time. So be considerate of them, so that way it's not a last minute request. But that can give you some more time, like I said, not only to wait for another offer to come in, but also just to kind of think and compare and really do the research that you want to do. All right, so thinking carefully. Why should you maybe negotiate a salary, you know, based on, you know, what they offer, and not just take exactly what they offer? One, you have more leverage before you accept, right? So that's why I kind of said you can express your excitement, but you don't necessarily have to say, oh my God, yes, I'm definitely going to take it. Because once you do that, you kind of lose power over negotiating salary. Not that you can't, because you haven't signed anything, it's not official, right? But once they know how excited that you were definitely planning on taking it, they know then they may not have to say yes to any negotiation because you've already pretty much shown your hand and said, yes, I definitely want to take it. Another reason you should negotiate, you won't get what you don't ask for, right? So asking for a little bit more or asking if it's negotiable, worst thing that they can say is no. And as long as you do it in an appropriate professional way, asking if it's negotiable or telling them that you had a range slightly higher in mind and would that be doable, as long as you do it in that professional way, they're not going to rescind the offer. Like if they reach out and say, hey, the offer is 50,000, you say, well, I really was expecting 100,000, like you're not going to be able to double it and actually get that, right? At least not in any, normal situation with an employer. So like having a realistic conversation with them and being polite and professional. Worst case scenario, the offer still stands at the initial amount that they offered. The other thing that you want to think about is sometimes organizations will expect you to negotiate, and so they will specifically leave room for it. Like they might know that they are willing to go up to $70,000. That's what they're willing to pay. But they might say 62 when they offer, because that way it will feel like a win to you when you ask if it's negotiable and can negotiate up to 70. I mean, it's not always going to be that large of an amount, but it's something to think about, right? So like if you aren't requesting it, you could potentially be leaving money on the table. Sometimes some organizations will give you exactly their highest, and that will be as high as they can go. But they'll tell you that if you ask if it's negotiable and they say, no, unfortunately, that's as high as we can go and that's what we can offer you, you'll know. So reason to negotiate, you might have a chance to get a little bit more money, or they might be expecting you to. Reasons not to negotiate. We're going to kind of talk through how you can get around these. So hopefully we get you to the point where you know there really are no reasons not to negotiate. So a reason potentially not to negotiate would be to not have enough information, to know what's appropriate to ask for, to not, if you don't feel comfortable negotiating, or potentially if you do it incorrectly, that it can backfire. Like I said, we're going to kind of talk through those things so you feel more comfortable. Not having enough information, one of the things we're about to get into is researching, and that's going to make it so you have the information that you need to know to make sure that you're asking for an appropriate amount. Practicing it, whether that's, in your head, in the car, asking Jeffrey or I for an appointment to talk it through and to practice it that way. Anything that can make you feel a little bit more comfortable having that conversation. Those are all things that you can do to prepare. So some personal factors, things that you want to think about when negotiating. If you have other offers, that's going to impact how you might negotiate or what you ask for. Sometimes having another offer and being able to compare can be helpful. If you have two offers and you're really interested in company A more than company B, but company A is paying less, sometimes you could go to company A and say, I was looking for something a little bit more, to negotiate a little bit. You could say, I have this offer with company B that's this. Could you match that? Or could you get a little closer to that? And sometimes they can, and sometimes they can't. Sometimes that can give you leverage. Sometimes it can't. Companies, if they're similar positions, will kind of know some of the things to look for. Like, are they similar positions? Maybe the other company is asking for more responsibility and that's why they pay more. Or maybe that company is in a different area of the country where cost of living is higher and that's why they can offer more. But sometimes that can be leverage to help you get another company to come up a little bit. Even if it's not up the whole amount, maybe they can meet you halfway or at least raise what they can offer a little bit. It's worth a shot. Skill or experience that you bring to the table can be another thing to mention. So if you feel like you have extra skills or experiences that weren't required of this position, but that you're going to bring, that could be something that you argue is a reason that you deserve more money, or maybe they ask for someone with a year's worth of experience with a specific programming language, and you've been doing it for 5 years, and pointing out that you have more experience and can bring more than maybe a different hire could, might be a reason for them to pay you more. Bringing up living expenses, cost of living, or an additional commute by taking their opportunity can sometimes work. Not always, but it's something to think about or consider. Employer factors for how they might act or react during negotiation. Sometimes there are standard practices for their organization. Like I said, sometimes they might say, we always leave a little bit of room so we can negotiate higher with a candidate, or sometimes they will say we always, offer the highest that we can go. And unfortunately, that's it. So that could change the way that a specific organization negotiates. Sometimes it's comparative salaries for the field or region. They may be also looking at Glassdoor or salary.com or some of these other sites, and they might know that for that position, they're on the higher end or they're on the lower end, and how that might affect their ability to negotiate. The available budget for a position, right? How much money does that department have? How much have they budgeted for that position? Is going to affect how much they can bring you in at. Salary levels for similar positions. Lots of times they don't like to bring in new employees at the same or similar positions higher than someone who's been there longer. It happens sometimes, but there has to be a really good reason for it. But if they have more experience than you, they're not going to want to bring you in way above their salary, because then they'll lose that employee, because they will feel bad that someone new came in and makes more money than them. The experience level of the HR representative that you're working with. This is another big factor. If you are talking with an HR representative, a recruiter who feels comfortable negotiating, it's going to go a little differently than maybe someone who doesn't feel as comfortable negotiating. And that will kind of potentially change how the conversation could go. The level of need. Are you solving a unique problem that you are one of a few qualified candidates that could do it? Or has the position been open a long time? If either of these things are true, they might be willing to put a little bit more money out there because they really need someone to come in and fill this position. If it's something where there's 30 other people behind you that would be willing to take the position for that amount, it may be harder than to convince them to come up a little bit higher. All right, so I want to come back to research and some of the things that I just mentioned as far as looking at salaries and stuff. So doing your research and homework is really important. Going into salary negotiation, if you're going to ask for more money, you want to know how much you're asking for and what you're, and you don't want to just throw out any number. You want to have a little bit of knowledge about the position and the area that you're looking at and how much similar positions get paid. Because again, if they're offering you one and you come in way ahead of that, you better have a good reason for why you're asking for all that more money. Is it, because you've seen that there are similar positions posted there and you think they're really, offering you a really, really low number, or, even if it's just a few thousand, knowing that you're seeing other positions and that's a realistic number to ask for are important. So sites like Glassdoor.com, besides having reviews of organizations, also have salary information. Payscale.com and salary.com are also two organizations where you can look up averages. The thing to remember though is pay attention to whether the number that they are giving you is for a specific area of the country, or if this is an average for across the entire country, because if you're looking in a lower or higher cost of living, that average may be more or less helpful. Other sites that you can look at, BLS.gov, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Occupational Outlook Handbook has some information. Now this is going to be nationwide, so it's not going to give you a specific area, but it can give you at least a range. You can look up different job types and industries and get an idea of a range of salaries. You could talk to classmates or alumni, what their experience has been with those organizations. NACE is the National Association of Colleges and Employers. And they do a salary survey, so you can always connect with one of us in the Career Center. We can't look at a specific company per se, but we can look by major or even industry to kind of get an idea of new graduates, what's the average salary for different areas of the country. So like by regions, we might be say, all right, well, in the Mid-Atlantic, it's this, in the Pacific Northwest, it's this, with certain majors or certain industries. So that can sometimes be helpful too. And then the University of Maryland, we of course do a graduation survey for all of our bachelor's degree recipients. And so that information is on our website, careers.umd.edu. You can also follow up with me, or if you're not in CMNS, if there's another program director for your college, or even one of our main employee, colleagues in the center in Hornbeak, we have access to see, and kind of look up some information beyond the bigger report too, and kind of help and can tell you, like, yes, we had 3 people last year that listed their salary information for Accenture, and we can give you like a range of what they came in at, right? So that's something to think about. But everyone's going to be different. So like that number is just something to look at and to help inform you. It's not going to be, a perfect answer every time. If you have questions or concerns about cost of living and comparing one salary in one area to another salary in another, these 2 resources here will give you, and you can also just Google cost of living calculator, you'll find a bunch of them. But these are just 2 as an example where you can specifically say, okay, I'm living in this area with this salary. How much would I need to make if I was living in this area? And it'll help give you an idea of like how far your money can go in those areas. All right. So having a strategy is very important with the negotiation process. We're assuming at this point that you've done your research. So you're going to take stock of that research, reflect on it, deciding what's important to you, what you think you can really realistically ask for. Also, before going into the conversation, it's helpful to think and establish what your floor or ceiling are. So your floor being, what is the absolute lowest that you would accept this position for? So maybe it's the amount they already offered it to you. Like you would have taken it, but you want to see if you get more. Or maybe it's still a little too low and you need to get it up a little bit, and okay, like the lowest I would take this is, 55,000 or something like that. But knowing what that number is and using that as a way of how you're asking too can be important. And ceiling, is there a certain, like if you're on the fence about an organization, is there a certain amount of money that if they were to offer it, no questions asked, you'd take it, right? And other things didn't matter. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. Know what you want, know what your expected salary range is, because it's going to be easier when you go into the conversation. So if you do ask, is this negotiable, or I've done some research and I'm really looking at this range, it can be helpful. Like if you know that the lowest you would take is 55, you don't want to tell them that you were thinking for 55. You might want to start a little bit above that. So that way, if they try to then negotiate you down a little bit, you might end at 55. It's a balance. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That's true for all of the advice that I've given you so far. I feel like I've said that a lot, but it's just ways to look at it and think. So you want to craft a thoughtful counter offer, and depending on how comfortable you feel, that could be a phone call. You could, kind of give yourself an idea of what you want to say, either writing out a script or, preparing what you want to say. You could also send it in an email. Again, we're going to come back to, though, don't wait until the deadline. If they want to know by this Friday, don't wait till Friday to ask about salary negotiation, because they're hoping to have a definite answer on Friday. They're not hoping that you're going to come to them and ask them about salary, because typically the person you're working with is going to have to go back to someone else to ask if they can negotiate or move to a certain amount. Like they might have approved to a certain amount to say yes to, but they might also need to talk to someone else to get approval for that conversation and that negotiation of salary. So giving them more time. If you know that you plan to negotiate, reach out when you know and when you feel comfortable having that conversation. Don't wait till the day of the deadline if you can help it. You will most likely probably conclude and officially accept or agree to something on the phone, or maybe not in person, but on Zoom in this case. If the agreement is not reached, you can always ask for more time. So let's say you reach out tomorrow and they say, no, unfortunately, I'm really sorry. Like that 50,000 is really, that's as high as we can go. And you could say, okay, well, given that, can I have a little bit more time to think about this, since you can't, meet the range that I was thinking about? Can I have a little more time to think about it? Can I have, the rest of the weekend or something like that? Again, they could say no, but it might give you some more time then to really think about if you still want to take it or if you want to wait and see if other opportunities come up. So buy yourself more time if you think it's helpful. That being said, if you've made a decision, don't drag it out. Like if you definitely don't want it, like you can't take the position for whatever reason, or it's just not going to meet your needs, bring closure to it, let them know. They'll understand. They have people that accept and decline offers all the time for a number of different reasons. But as soon as you know and have made the decision, let them know. It helps them move on and look at other candidates. It helps you move on and think about other opportunities. But no matter how it goes, always express your gratitude, regardless of the outcome. Even if you can't come to an agreement, if you ask and you try to bring them up to 55 and they say, nope, 50 is as high as we're going. And that that's just not enough for the area that you're going to be living in and that you really need at least 55 or whatever the number is. You can decline the offer and still appreciate and thank them for their time, their consideration. Again, they liked you, they wanted to hire you, right? So thanking them and leaving with that positive attitude and just say, I'm sorry we couldn't come to agreement, but I'm going to have to, pass for now, but I really appreciate your time and consideration. I hope we have the opportunity to work together in the future. Something like that, something professional that sounds nice. Means that there could be opportunities for you in the future with that organization. Maybe you go and get your first position somewhere else, and then you come back and you find a higher level position with that organization that does pay you what you want, or is the type of work that you want to do, whatever that piece is that wasn't quite right. And because it ended well the first time with how you chose to handle, not taking the offer, that opportunity is still available to you. Not that I think anyone would do this, but I'm sure that it happens somewhere, but none of us, because Turk's, better than that. But if you were to say, well, that's ridiculous, and fly off the handle and say, I can't believe you won't pay me this, and that's, and flip down on them, then that probably wouldn't put you in the best light should you decide to apply for something else with them, right? So like I said, it goes without saying, I don't think we'd do that, but I'm sure in the history of the world, someone has done that. So I mention it anyway. All right, so I'm going to go to our chat because I know some questions have been coming through. And please feel free to put more in here as they come up, as we talk, or as they come to you. Do you know any websites to compare salaries? So yes, I mentioned some of them. This was probably just sent through before I got to them, but yes, salary.com, Glassdoor, and PayScale are kind of the big ones. And then, like I said, some other resources that we have in the center as well, or Occupational Outlook handbook can help too.
Rachel, I have one question that came in. So one student was asking how the negotiation process may look different if you're on a student visa, and how, is it possible to have one thing that you negotiate being visa sponsorship by the employer?
Absolutely, yes. It can. The search process and the negotiation process can be different, right? If you need sponsorship. So certainly that can be a conversation. Lots of times if you need sponsorship, that's probably something that you're going to know ahead of time and potentially might be part of the way that you job search. If you know that an organization never sponsors or doesn't like to, that might not be something that you choose to apply to in the first place. Sometimes it's part of the negotiating piece because an organization might sometimes be willing to sponsor if it's a position that they really need to fill, or sometimes may not if it's a position that they feel like they can find, enough citizens to fill. I think I wish it were different. I think sometimes some organizations will feel like they don't have to negotiate as much with those people that need sponsorship, our international students, because they think that there are less opportunities, and there are less opportunities, but I think sometimes people take advantage of that. I don't like that they do that. I think it's possible. that they could say, well, the student really needs sponsorship, and so they'll be happy to get sponsorship, and they might, you know, try to throw a lower salary. So I think in that case, asking, I mean, you might not always get it, but I think it's something to keep in mind and to make sure that you're advocating for yourself. I think the best thing you can do if you find an employer that may be hesitant about sponsoring is doing the best you can to educate yourself and then educate them as to what the process entails. Because I think sometimes it's not that they don't want us hire someone that needs to be sponsored, it's that they think it's too much work, or they're afraid it's too hard, right, to go through the sponsorship process. So if you can share with them information that you've gotten, either online, or if you've talked a lot with, I know that I look to the International Student Scholars Office a lot for information, that they can be a resource to kind of say, it's not as hard as you think, or even knowing that you have, I hope I don't mess this up, I think OPT is the one that's after you graduate, like knowing that you have a year, or if you're in the tech space, you have 3 years to work before you need sponsorship. That could be a conversation that you have with them too. Like, you don't need to sponsor me yet. I have this many, I have a year, or I have 3 years that I can work before I would need sponsorship. That's something to think about as well. Did I answer all the parts of that question, Jeffrey?
Yep, I think you did.
All right, cool. Just wanted to make sure before I moved on. What's an acceptable salary range to go up to? For example, is 10,000 higher, too much than what they're offering? Sometimes, but not, sometimes not. Like, it's hard. Like, that's why I think researching is really important, because if you're doing research and they're offering 60,000 and you see all these positions at 70,000, then you know that you could probably ask for that and maybe land somewhere in the middle. If the position is offering 60,000 and all the positions you're seeing are offering 60 or 62, it may be harder to ask for 70. I also think that 10,000 comparatively, like if we're talking about a salary, like if you are one of the very lucky people that can apply for a position and be competitive for it, that might offer 6 figures, maybe 10,000, because it's not as big a piece of your salary. Like, it's 10% versus if someone's at 50,000, asking for 10% is 20%. Like, sometimes I think the percentage of the salary could also be a determinant factor as to whether it's acceptable or not. Like I said, though, if you're doing research and you're seeing that it really should be up here, I think you could have the conversation and say, I'm seeing a lot of positions, similar positions with similar companies that are offering this much. Is that something you can do, or can you explain to me maybe why this position isn't in range with those? Because maybe it's something that you're misunderstanding, that these other positions have way more responsibility than this, or something like that. Or maybe it's not. Maybe it's just, hey, we're a smaller company, we can't offer as much as those other companies because they're big companies. But they might be able to help you understand why there's such a big difference if they can't meet that difference. Like I said, I think that's why research is important, because then it's not just, oh my gosh, look at this crazy student who asked for 10,000 more. It's, okay, this student just pointed out that our salary range may not be in range with the going rate in this, region of the country. Plus, I also think that, like, you can ask and, kind of go about it politely and tell them why you're asking for it, whether you have another offer or because of your research. And if they can't do it, they'll say, we're sorry, this is what we can do. And you can move on from there and make your decision. Can I elaborate on what happens when HR representative doesn't feel very comfortable negotiating? I think that could happen. I think when an HR representative doesn't feel comfortable, it could manifest in a couple different ways. I don't mean to say that means the HR representative won't want to negotiate because they feel, or won't negotiate because they feel uncomfortable. I think it could just be a little bit more awkward, right? So if you have someone that doesn't feel as comfortable doing it, it could just feel a bit more awkward when you have the conversation. I think in any situation, they typically have to go back and ask someone else. They could potentially try to discourage you from doing it. but I don't think it inherently changes it a ton. It just, the way you experience it and the ease of it may just feel different if they feel more comfortable or less comfortable having that conversation. Right. What about negotiations at a startup or small company? It's still possible. Just because it's a small company doesn't mean that you can't negotiate. Just depending on the organization and how they run their business, it may be easier to do or harder to do, right? Sometimes the startup, it can be difficult because if they only have limited funds because they're a startup, they may not be able to offer as much. Sometimes what they'll do instead is offer stock options once their company, they're assuming, booms, then you have more access to money, right? Or sometimes it might be, well, we can't hire you at this, but if we can get to this benchmark point and we're making this much money, then we'll give everybody a bonus and we can, bring you up. And small companies sometimes are small companies intentionally, and sometimes that means that they can pay higher. Sometimes it means they don't have as much money. It really depends. But you can definitely still have negotiations with those organizations. And sometimes they'll be able to meet them and sometimes they won't, just like a larger company. Because sometimes a larger company does have the money and could negotiate, but they might choose not to because they assume that the prestige of their name will keep you even if they don't give you as great a salary. I've seen it with universities too. Ones that have higher prestige that think that they don't need to pay as much. Not Maryland, but I'm not naming names. Alrighty, let's see if there are other questions. What should you do if you are offered something very embarrassing, like a $20,000 salary and you have a master's degree? Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I'm laughing because I remember applying for a position. This was after I had my master's degree. And I was really interested in the position and I was trying to move back to this area and they offered me $30,000. Now, granted, this was 10 years ago. So it wasn't yesterday, but $30,000 in Baltimore, I mean, it doesn't get you too far. And I was making a similar amount of money and I was working in residence life at the time. And so like my housing and a small meal plan were provided. So it was definitely going to be a huge like loss of buying power for me. So at least I knew it before I interviewed. They were like, would you accept this salary? This is what we're at. And so I just I think what you have to do, if you're still interested in it, I mean, I think it's hard if it's as low as 20,000 and we're, not talking about, I don't know what we'd be talking about at that. I think if it's that low, it's going to be hard to bring it up to something that you would accept. And I think you could say like something along the lines of, I'm really sorry, as a professional with a master's degree, I'm really looking for a salary and a benefits package that's a little bit more than that. Like if it's not quite as low as 20,000, if it's definitely low, but you think you can bring them up, you could always try negotiating. I think the other thing that you could just kind of say politely is, thank you very much, but that unfortunately that salary is not going to be enough for me to accept the position. And just try to be polite about it, but and move on. But it's difficult. Hopefully that doesn't happen too often, but it does. I remember applying for a position that offered 20,000, although it was even more years ago and it was live on. So at least you got like an apartment out of it. But yeah, if that's happened to you, connect with me later because I would love to know what position it was off the record. All right. Can you offer another counter offer if they reject the first one? Like instead of increasing in salary, a signing bonus instead? Absolutely, absolutely. That's why I brought it up. So if you ask for an increase in salary and they're saying, we're really sorry, this is the top of the limit, this is where we can go. I think you could also say, if that's not possible, are there other ways that we can negotiate? Is there an offer to do a signing bonus so it would only be a one-time thing, or could you offer a relocation bonus or something else? Or, again, if there were other things that you wanted to negotiate, like more opportunities to work from home than they normally allow, or more days off or something like that, I think absolutely, if they reject the first offer, you can always try to switch things up a little bit and negotiate with other pieces that are important to you. Absolutely, that's an option. How to convert an internship into a job. When you initiate the topic with HR, and how should you talk to your supervisor first? I think there's a lot of different ways that you could go about this. I think lots of times if you are interning somewhere and they like your work, they're already going to be thinking about how can they get you, to be a full-time hire. Lots of times that's something that they're thinking, because if they like you and they know your work, they want to keep you around, hopefully, right? And it's a lot less work than going out and recruiting for someone else. But if they aren't approaching you and coming to you with that idea first, I think I would probably start with the supervisor, because I figure they know my work best. And hopefully, knowing that you've done good work for them, they're going to want to be an advocate for you, whether they want to hire you directly into their department if they have an opportunity to do so, or even let's say they're like, hey, you've been a great intern, but we just don't have a spot for you right now. But then they might be able to be the advocate that says, but like, let's see where, like, who is hiring within the organization that we can get you into. Like, hopefully then they can either go to HR or go to other departments within the organization and say, hey, he or she's been a really great intern. We'd love to find a place for them somewhere in the organization. Or if you know that you want to work in a different department, like you liked your internship, but you want to try something else, then going to your supervisor and letting them know that you've had a really good opportunity and you want to try to explore other opportunities within the organization, and can they help, or can they be an advocate? I think that's definitely a conversation that you can have, and letting them know why you're interested can definitely be a positive, opportunity for you. So that's the last of the questions that I saw. I'm going to leave this up. This is my contact information. Jeffrey's is on here too. So if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us. Even if you aren't in CMNS, please feel free, you've been here today, reach out with questions if you have them. Or if you have any questions that you want to stick in the chat before we end, that's fine too. But otherwise, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate all the really great questions, and good luck with your job search. Good luck with job negotiations. And I hope they give you all the money and benefits you want. Have a good night.